I want to welcome everyone, and we've got a bunch of guests here tonight. We're once again able to have Gert, who is one of the founders, or co-founders, I guess, of Lucee, and a guest here in person as well as remote for quite a few years. And then Randy and I, 2 summers ago now, I guess, went to their conference in Munich, and
Yes.
I'd like to go back, and I've told Nick, who wasn't able to come with us, that when he goes, whatever year it is, I'm going to go with him. And I haven't seen the Nordic countries yet, and I will leave just like I did Eastern Europe, and make a long vacation of it, I guess. So go ahead. We're very anxious to learn. There's a lot of people in the room that are
Yeah.
using Lucee, myself included sometimes. So
Okay. Well, we would love to have you here in Europe. I mean, I'm based in Switzerland, but Munich is not so far away. And CF Camp is always very funny and very refreshing. It's good to see lots of old, well-known faces and some very unfamiliar ones as well. We just, with a fellow company, they just hired a bunch of Lucee developers who are 23, and they are using Lucee for a couple of years already, which is nice. Anyway, so sharing my screen. Now, I was asking Nick before whether he knows who this is. Well, this is our national icon in Switzerland, which is Heidi. And this is from a Japanese anime from the 70s, where they tell the story from Johanna Spiri of Heidi. And so we're kind of course, proud of Heidi. And there is also a Heidi Land, like an amusement park named after her in Switzerland. Anyway, so let me just start by saying really we love Lucee. We really love Lucee. I mean, we are now working with it for 22 years with and for CFML. And we have built Lucee for us developers. Right? So like we want it to be, and we will continue to do so. So we will continue pouring our hearts into it, and what we don't like while programming, we will change. Sometimes Adobe will go along, sometimes they won't. There will be new companies popping up like Boxlang, and others have disappeared. And we have seen competition come and go over the past. Right? I mean, I think in the meantime, there have been 6 or 7 CFML languages or similar to CFML languages in the past. And while I completely love the initiative of Boxlang, because it gives a new vibe, and I completely understand Ortus why they're doing it, what their intention with that is. Still, we will address that, learn from it, and we'll try to respond and try to introduce also the things into it. I mean, just a question for you, everyone. Does anyone know which one was the first open source CFML project? Anyone? Give you just 10 seconds. Anyone? Don't ask ChatGPT or Google. They might not even know it. No, it's not the .NET one. So the first, the .NET one was Open Blue Dragon, or bluedragon.net, or whatever, Open Blue Dragon. They were open source before Rilo was open source, but the first one was the Smith project, so-called Smith project. It is actually also based in Switzerland. Yes? Sorry? Yes,
was
Rick?
it in Eastern Europe?
No, it actually was in Switzerland as well, right? So the Swiss project, Smith project, was based in Switzerland. And I can tell you, I once had a meeting with the owner of the Smith project, and they actually wanted to buy Rilo for an incredibly low amount. So we never, anyway, we wouldn't have wanted to sell Rilo back then. And that was the first open source project, CFML project. They were, of course, nowhere next to ColdFusion or Rilo or even OpenBlue Dragon at that time. And OpenBlue Dragon went open source, I guess, about 2-3 months before Rilo went open source. Anyway, so we just retired Lucee Lang in 6.0, I guess. Lucee Lang was something like you can do everything without the CF, so just using the tags without CF, and that would have been processed by the Lucee compiler as well in the same way, so that you would have something like HTML and JavaScript, but on the server side a little bit. But we retired that the other in the latest versions because nobody was using it apart from us in some small projects, and it actually never took off. Doesn't matter. But anyway, competition always drives innovation. We have seen that with ColdFusion. So ColdFusion was becoming a little lazy in the early 2000s. And when Rilo came along, they picked up their pace and they introduced loads of things that are in there now that make it a great project. And competition is always good. So we definitely embrace that. But still, it's always the question, what can you be doing better in the project? What can you do better in the syntax, the language, and the server side, etc.? So over the past, we've done some good work, I think. We have reworked and improved the documentation and testing, loads of unit tests that have gone into the Lucee project. I guess about 150,000 unit tests are running before any version of Lucee goes live. Then one of the things that we were doing is we neglected pull requests from other people in the past, but given the time restrictions that we had, and now we're able to add some more folks to the Lucee project, we are now putting a high priority to external pull requests. And so we got them down to 0, close to 0 at least. And obviously this will change as pull requests come in. We had over 200 of them, and we closed and implemented almost all of them. And it is always kind of a floating number between somewhere between 0 and 20 pull requests that are open, depending on whether we're doing a surge or not. And also regarding the tickets, we want to get the bug tickets down to close to 0. And this means we have implemented loads of bug fixes. And obviously with 6.0, 6.1, and 6.2, there will be loads of new bugs filed. And now we have at least 1.5 persons dedicated just to investigating tickets and writing test cases and everything that is coming along with it. In addition, what we have done is we improved our documentation. Of course, you can always do better, and we will never match Ortus's mastery of documentation, but everyone can help and improve it. We have projects that are, the documentation of Lucee is a project that you can contribute and commit to. And if you have, for example, if you have examples for Lucee code that are, and you want to attach it to a specific documentation page, you can just do that, and then that code will be executed in try-CF on the page itself, embedded. So, and we're started doing recipes. Now, let me just show you what a recipe is and where they are. So if you go to GitHub Lucee docs, you will find a place here called recipes. And these recipes, for example, just contain things like, okay, how do I do a cached within request, right? So if you want to have a query that is cached within a request only, then you just use cached within, and the keyword is request. And there are loads of recipes that we're adding to the documentation here, and I'll tell you a little more about this in a bit. Okay, good. Next thing that we have added is a monitor. The monitor is something that gives you everything that you need to know from your debugging console or your former debugging console. We call it monitor now. So it has the whole documentation in there. It has the debugging information in there. It has metrics in there, which gives you the current usage of memory and CPU, etc. I'll tell you more about this in a bit as well. Then we're working with the folks from Software Cobbler regarding the Lucee debugger, right, in VS Code. And we're only focusing on VS Code because we have some other things that we're adding to that, like the language server implementation, which I'll tell more about that as well. Then, of course, we're doing a lot of more stuff in AI. I mean, with AI being all around. Now that if you, for example, have an error, then AI, in this case, ChatGPT, is supposing a reason why that error happened and what you can do in order to improve that, and have some examples, tell you more about this as well. So this, for example, is the portion of the AI implementation there, which tells you, okay, that why the error happened and what you can do to prevent it. So regarding AI integration, we support all different kinds of AI protocols like ChatGPT, Gemini, and even also about this, I will tell you more in a bit. Docs.lucee.org will remain where it is, and it will be a Docker image as it was before, and it will be also generated, and also the same documentation will be available local as it was available in the past as well. So if you go to your site /lucee/docs or /doc/, then you'll see the same documentation as you see on docs.lucee.org. The good advantage about that one is that you will see the documentation for your locally installed Lucee version. And lucee.org will be more as a portal, which takes you to other places, like, for example, creating new Docker images and stuff like that. Yes, and if you want to help, obviously go to the Lucee Docs repository and just add the things that you have learned and that you would like to see in the documentation, create a pull request, and then we'll try to pull that and implement that and merge that as soon as possible. Okay, now what we also do is we will support more environment like Docker in this case, and we will focus a lot of our energy onto Docker and allow you to build options or build your Docker images from a small application that we'll release as well, where you can just say, okay, customize your own Docker build by adding these extensions, this version, et cetera, and then that generates you a Docker version that you actually want to run locally. You can use Lucee environment variables or environment variables that Lucee is then started up with, like the Lucee admin password, like data sources, almost anything that you can configure in application CFC or in the admin can also be configured with environment variables, so that you can completely script your startup of Lucee with the desired outcome. We do that a lot with many of our clients, that we have a script deployment and a script startup. So we are almost never using the administrator. We only use the administrator, for example, locally when we want to turn on debugging, or we want to use something from the admin for a temporary solution. Because if it's a Docker and you restart it, obviously the settings will be gone. So this is that app that will release with the to build your own Docker environments. And you can create a Dockerfile CFS, which allows you to configure your Docker environment. But more to that will be released with Lucee 7. And we'll share more information about this when this goes live. Good. Now, Lucee 6, I don't know whether you know what Maven is, but Maven is a configuration or a project management tool that allows you to start up any Java application with all the dependencies and everything. And it's currently the de facto standard. So if you want to, for example, include a different library or a specific library, and you don't know what this library is depending on, all you have to do is you have to find that library on Maven, include it in your Maven settings, and then all of the dependencies of that library will be automatically resolved and downloaded. And Lucee now uses Maven mostly for Lucee 6.1, and Lucee 6.2 and obviously 7 are only using Maven for downloading everything. And there is a simple rule of thumb. If it is on Maven, Lucee can use it, right? So as soon as you identify a specific library or something that you want to use from the Java world, and it is available on Maven, then you can use it within Lucee. Yeah, so with Lucee 6, 6.1, 6.2, and 7, we will actually close the gap between Java and Lucee. So Lucee 6.2 and 7 will be more or less seamlessly, you'll be able to seamlessly use Java within Lucee. Like, for example, instantiate a class, a Java class, very simple with the new keyword. Like, for example, if you're now creating a new component, you can actually now create a new class, a Java object, Java class, with the exact same syntax, right? And this allows us to, of course, use very popular frameworks like JUnit, for example, or any Java application that you would like to use and use within Lucee should be only a few calls in your Lucee code away to be able to use it, right? Now, also what we have done regarding the server environments, we have upgraded the versions of Java that we're now supporting. So Lucee 5 was up to Java 11. It supported Java 21 as well, but more in an experimental way. Lucee 6 is allowing you to use Java 11. So 11 is mandatory. We're not going down to Java 8 anymore. And Java 21 is also possible. And even Java, and I think Lucee 7 is based on Java 22. Right, and all the Lucee extensions work with Java 8 and up to 28 and 21. Yeah, I know the versions of Java version numbers are really a mess. Since there was a patent issue regarding Oracle and OpenJDK and other JVM vendors, the main package had to be renamed from JavaX to Jakarta. And which, of course, required that all your libraries had to be renamed as well, right? From JavaX to Jakarta if you're using OpenJDK. And Lucee can now handle both of them in Lucee 7. So it doesn't really matter what kind of JVM you're running below. Lucee will work with either, right? And you don't have to configure that specifically. So anyway, this is kind of the broader info about it. So let's have a look what is new in terms of Lucee 6. Okay, I'm just watching the comments in the chat because that's on my screen at the right. Anyway, so what will be new in Lucee 6 plus in the syntax? Some of these things are already known, so I might have presented that about, I don't know, 18 or 20 months ago when I did the last presentation at the Michigan CFOG. So the first thing is using subcomponents. You know, nowadays when you create a component, you have to create a file called, I don't know, address.cfc, and then you have a file which contains a component opening and closing and some methods and some properties or some this variables or variables. And then you create an instance out of that address.cfc. But what you can also do now within that address.cfc, you can create a subcomponent inside the component. Now, where would that make sense? Well, let's assume that you have two components that are closely dependent on each other. Why would you want to waste another file name for that, right? So why not just use something that is related to it, like, I don't know, address variation or something like that, or payment, and then you have a payment Stripe, and then you have a payment Tipalti, or you have to pay a payment whatever PayPal, all of it in the same component. Sometimes it's really just a matter of just getting rid of loads of these file accesses. And the way how you can actually address those is by just creating a new myCFC $sub. And you see here, we named it sub. And here in line 4, we have CFC equals new myCFC $sub. This is how you can create one of those subcomponents. Okay, then this is also very nice. If you just have a very small component and you don't want to create a file for it, well, just create it inline, just like this. You just say inline equals new component, and then you just have your functions and whatever you want in there. And then you can just call that component as you have just created it. So it's creating it on the fly. By the way, if there are any questions, just send it. This is a new thing which we'll introduce in Lucee 7, inline interfaces, which you can, of course, use as an interface as well for a new component. But here is the new thing. You can create structs that are actually implementing an interface. Well, where is this interesting? Well, and this is a very brand new thing. We're actually still discussing about the right syntax. But the interface should just define that my struct needs to have these following keys, like first name, last name, and age. And you can define defaults as well. Where the idea for this is if you, for example, want to pass in a struct to the function, which usually you would do by just having a bunch of arguments in there, like, for example, 15 arguments, and then if you change something, you added a 16th argument. So your functions get bigger and bigger and bigger, the function definition. Or you require a struct that you pass in, and it's one single argument, but you have no control over what is in that struct in there. So what you can, of course, do, you can pass in a component, right? And then you can, of course, pass in an interface as well, which then this component that you pass in is satisfying. But components are very heavy and very big. So we thought that we could use the interface signature for structs as well. So in this case, you can make sure that the struct that you're passing into a function is adhering to the interface that you have defined above, right? Okay, I hope this makes the idea.
Looks like there is a question from Dave. Shane, sorry.
Yeah.
Hang on a second here.
I'm so sorry. I meant to react with a thumbs up and I hit the raise.
No worries.
Anyways, I think the interface is really cool.
Yes, I like it as well. I mean, I was rooting for this for a long time, and in the meantime, thankfully, our core devs see the need of it as well. And we're now implementing it. Whether it's going to, we didn't want to introduce a new keyword for this. So we thought, why not use interface? Because interfaces are defined as interfaces for component. So if we're kind of misusing that by using the properties, then we can tell each struct to implement a specific interface. And this way, you can make sure that the contract that you're signing with the interface is actually valid by just requiring an inline interface myStruct, right? Anyway, okay,
John,
good.
John, you've got a question?
John,
There
you
we
have
go.
yeah, there you go. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. As you do this, is there any chance that that will also enhance the code hinting in VS Code?
Well, while I'm addressing this later in my talk, I can actually tell you that we're implementing a language server model as well with VS Code, which allows you to do introspecting and go to definition stuff. I'll cover that in a bit later. But obviously, if we release that component that talks to VS Code with Lucee 7, then that should be possible as well, right? So that you can do things like that. But talking to VS Code is only possible not at runtime, but at compile time. So yeah, we'll have to see. I still don't know it yet because it is this feature is literally about 3 weeks old, right? So it may or may not be that we're going to implement it exactly as you requested it.
So I had a question as well.
Sure.
Do you see this also being able to work with like the REST serializer or some of the other serializers?
Well, it has to. It has to actually, because then you could just tell your REST serializer to implement that interface that you define, that struct interface, and then, well, it throws an error if it doesn't, right? So I think it has to be implemented across the board, because otherwise, it is useless, right? I mean, this is what interfaces are for. Always you ask yourself, what is an interface good for? Interfaces in ColdFusion anyway are a weird beast, because while you can use an interface in ColdFusion and Lucee, you can still inject and delete methods from it, and it's not throwing errors, right? Whereas in Java, if you're not implementing the interface, well, there's an error, right? An error happening. So yes, I definitely hope so that this will be addressed everywhere.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
And that's the last
Good.
of the questions we had in the list.
Okay, cool. Yes, so obviously this is one of the most important tags that we have introduced, or that CFML has in general. And we still want to improve it as good as we can. So we're introducing many things. So you may have seen many of these things already, like query listeners. Query listeners were implemented because, for example, in one case, I remember we were using a specific data source for one of our clients. And that client wanted to know, since the server has been used from Lucee, from a client API, then from a CRM project and some business tools, etc. And they wanted to know where the queries come from because they have no source. So what they wanted to have on every query, they wanted to have a header which contains a comment which says this query comes from here, right? Like, here's the source code, here is the application, and that's the line. So that is why we invented this. And then we had query listeners. So what you get is you get all the arguments in the before function. You can even change them. So what we did is we took the SQL, added the comment at the top, and then sent it to the query. And then in the after, you can take the results, manipulate the results, and react on errors. There is also a before, after, and an error. And so that is very, very powerful. And you can define this as it's defined here, this.query.listener in the application CFC, which means all the queries are executing the before and after of the query listener, right? And you can also define a new query listener as a component, which needs to contain then the before, the after, and the error. And since we introduced query listeners, obviously a clear follow-up implementation is the async argument or attribute, which allows you to just take a query and execute it asynchronously. And the listener on error would then be fired will be triggered if an error occurs, right? So even if it's called synchronously and there is an error, you would still get the error message if you have a listener assigned to it. You can also do it this way, that you're actually doing it in line with the query tag or the query execute function by adding a listener which has an error which contains a specific code that output to the system output in this case. Okay, this is one thing that I use very much. So sometimes I have queries which return millions of records, really millions of records, and I need to kind of browse through them and run through them, I don't know, in 5,000 records and export them to a file or generate something out of it, etc., etc. So what this function does, it actually is opening up a cursor or a pointer to the result set and then streams the result set in, let's say, block factor 1,000 records at a time. And your listener then receives a query which has 1,000 records or less if it's the last one. So for example, if you have 1,250 records, the first one will have 1,000 records, and the second time the listener function is called, it will have a query which has 250 records, right? So this way, your memory won't overflow, because if you're now running a query that returns 1,000,000 records, well, your memory is gone. So, or you have to paginate through it or do other things. But if you're using query lazy allows you to just always have just 1,000 records in memory, and then you can stream through the whole result set, using that quite a lot. Okay, this is also something that I like a lot. Very often I'm waiting for a specific code to run into a timeout. And I know that this code has to execute within a certain amount of time. So what I can do is I can just wrap it around in a CF timeout or in a timeout curly bracket tag. And if the timeout is reached, then an exception will be thrown. So for example, here, you can even pass an on error to the CF timeout tag, and then you can tell it, okay, good, dump the argument and throw a catch afterwards. Right?
So I do have a question about that. Is it
Sure.
possible to, for like the reverse of that, where I have a chunk of code which I know is going to take a million seconds or whatever it might be, that I can wrap it in that timeout and that overrides the timeout for the page or for the rest of the application?
Okay, look, there is one thing that you need to know. Lucee 6 and above has no request timeout anymore. It doesn't have that anymore. Because the issue is this. If your code, so first of all, what Lucee does, Lucee runs the code if it can. So for example, there are lots of things that we have improved in this area. So let's assume you have an endless loop. An endless loop could bring your server down, right? So the Lucee timeout that you set will only be obeyed if the number of threads that you're occupying and that are running endlessly are reaching a certain threshold, right? And then they're kind of killed. But besides that, what is the reason for a timeout? The reason for a timeout is actually just mostly sloppy coding. And usually the timeout that if you put in a timeout and you run a query, for example, or you run a low-level function or a CF HTTP, the code will not break and not stop after 50 milliseconds, after 50 seconds. It will just not. Try it out in ColdFusion, try it out in Lucee 5 and before. It will not stop, because if there is a native function where Java just is in there, where Lucee has no control over, then the code will not stop, right? So the CF timeout tag, you can definitely use that if you know you want to wrap something into a specific amount of time that you, or into a time that you know this will take that amount of time. But by default, you don't have to use the request timeout at all anymore. Right? I know this might be a little weird, but it works, and we have never experienced any issues. We only had experienced issues when Lucee tried to kill requests that were not killable, right? And then if you, for example, then kill the request with Fusion Reactor or something like that, then the server sometimes even gets unstable, right? Because that's the server maybe was in a native function, and you could actually rip the rug under Lucee's feet, right? Are there any questions to this? Because I know this is maybe a sensitive topic. Good. Okay. So next thing that we've introduced is function listeners. Now, function listeners is a new syntax that we've introduced, where you can now add a listener at the end of the function by just adding a colon. So you do something, colon, function result or error. And this means this function, just by defining the listener, will immediately be executed asynchronously. So it will just be executed as if it was wrapped in a CF thread, right? Another example here, it will return a thread name, because, as soon as it's asynchronously, you can't really return a value because the function is not yet executed. It's just immediately executed and then in the background. So what it will return now is a thread name. And if you do thread join thread name, then it waits until the function is done, and then you can dump whatever the function was supposed to be defining. This should make multi-threading easier to handle, easier to deal with, because very often when you have a CF thread and in there is an error, how do you react to that? How do you catch the error? How do you handle exceptions within a CF thread? We have done, by the way, quite a few things regarding threads. Not horrible, yes. Okay, I won't go into too many details here, but you can use a component as well for this, and just use a struct which has two functions, on success, on fail, or a component which has the same things. Good exception handling now allows you to use nested exceptions, where in this case you're throwing something and then you do another CF throw in the catch, which has another message. And this looks like this, that you have one exception at the top, and another exception, which is the caused by exception, where you say cause is, and this is the caused by, and that is the other one, so that you can see one exception caused the other exception. And this is the dump of the same thing. So you would see, if you dump the catch block, you will see two elements in there, one the cause and the other one is the error that has been thrown. The next thing is exceptions in threads, right? So if you, for example, dump there is an exception happening in the thread, and you have the thread then joined, you can dump out what the error was that happened in that thread, if there is an error. And it then looks like this, where it says parent thread stack trace, where you have the stack trace of the parent, and then the error that you were throwing here. So you were throwing this one, and the error is here, and this is the parent thread up here. Okay, good. So let's see some server improvements. What did we do in Lucee 6.1 in the server, in the release of Lucee 6.1? Loads of faster file operations. So we're using a different Java implementation for this, which is a lot faster. Then the bytecode that we're generating is a lot smaller, obviously. The startup time now, for example, if I'm starting Lucee on my machine, should be about 1.5 seconds or something like that. Let me just see whether I have a Lucee version here. Let's see. Okay, yes, I can use this one. So let me just show you that. I have startup here, and total thing is 1.8 seconds, right? I've seen it in 1.2 seconds as well, but it depends mostly on what is running on my machine. Maybe now that Teams running, it's taking a little longer, and therefore, but our goal is to get this below a second and even way lower than that. So for example, for Lucee 7, we're planning to start headless deployments as well, which hopefully will get us down to about 100 to 200 milliseconds startup, so that you can finally use it, start using it in Lambda functions, etc. Okay, then we have introduced monitoring, as I showed you before. This is now something that you can control within within your application. So these are Lucee application CFC settings. Then there is also a new area in the admin called Lucee Security, which contains things. Okay, can you use variables in queries like pound signs, or do you need to use CF query query param all the time, right? So you can prevent Lucee from even executing that code and throwing an error. Okay, and then, for example, you maybe want to use expressions like a function name within a struct that you don't want to execute that for whatever reason, because these were all attack vectors in the past, like SQL injection or zero-day attacks sometimes even. And we even closed loopholes that have not been found in Lucee, but in Adobe ColdFusion. And we were just making sure that we're not having the same issues. And therefore, they ended up in this area here. Okay, and then
looks like there is a question there asking about monitoring.
If there is a clear and concise way to get Fusion Reactor working. Well, yes, I'll give you an address to call the guys at Integral to ask them to do that. No, but it shouldn't be an issue. I don't know. What issues do you have, if I may ask, regarding Fusion Reactor? Is there, you can just open up the mic so that I can maybe answer that. We're using Fusion Reactor currently at many clients. I don't know of really loads of issues that we had, but what is the issue that you're seeing?
Okay. Am I unmuted? I can't tell if...
Yep, we can hear you.
I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you.
Awesome. So I am just speaking on behalf of, this is going to be for Trevor and Shane, this question. But when we're going from ColdFusion to Fusion Reactor right now, which is why I said, let's join this meeting.
You mean you go from ColdFusion to Lucee?
I'm sorry, Adobe. Sorry, yes.
From Adobe to Lucee.
Yeah,
right?
to Lucee. My apologies. Yeah, so that's the big project, big push we're working on. And so as soon as we started that, we immediately, everything broke in our CFC because of the Fusion Reactor. And I could be like saying this wrong, but that was the motive for me jumping on, was make sure that Fusion Reactor works from the big guys. So that's why I asked the question.
So Fusion Reactor by default works without any issues, right? We have it working with almost any single client. And, you know, the thing is that if CFCs break, that has to have another different reason. So what you can do is just shoot me an email, and maybe we can talk about this offline, because we're working with the Integral guys for about the last 15 years, and they never told us about any issues that they had with installing Fusion Reactor. In the beginning, yes, I have to admit, until we got everything kind of working. But nowadays, it isn't really a big issue installing it, right? So anyway, please send me an email. If you don't have my email address, gert@rasia.ch, you can just email me, and then we can take it offline. Hope that is okay for you. Okay, cool, good. So next thing is then Lucee 6.2. In Lucee 6.2, we have introduced loads of experimental things that are already in 7, and in 7 they are, in Lucee 7 they are official. So in Lucee 6.2, you will see in the admin, for example, let me just show you in the Lucee admin of 6.2, like for example, if I go to AI, it says experimental. Right? It says here AI experimental. This feature is experimental and may be subject of change, right? So we have quite a few of those things, right? But what we have done is we have used this. We have introduced the Java X to Jakarta switch, or the support of both. Then support of Tomcat 10 and Java 22. And without further ado, I will jump to Lucee 7. Right, and Lucee 7 is going to be out, and the beta is going to be out quite soon. I'm not sure whether it's going to be in January or early February, but this is what we're currently working on it. One of the big things that we introduce in Lucee 6 is we get rid of reflection. Now, maybe many of you won't know what reflection is, but if you're using a language like Lucee, which is not typed. So your variable can go from an integer to a string, to a Boolean, to a date, to a query, to a struct, to whatever. And you talk to a language that is typed like Java, then obviously Java needs to make sure that you're adhering to the interface, that the objects that you're referring to are obeying, right? So you need to make sure that whatever you call is casted properly or whatever. And for that, there was a very old way of doing it, the so-called reflection, where it actually goes at runtime and checks what type is it, can I cast my Lucee variable to that type, and then I was calling that object with that type. And in the meantime, Lucee does it completely differently. And we're not using something like dynamic invocations. I guess dynamic invocation is used by Boxlang, as far as I remember. I've seen it in their presentation. While this is a good other way of doing it without reflection, reflection is about, I would say, 5 to 10 times slower than dynamic invocation. Lucee actually introspects the Java and the Lucee code and writes indexes of classes optimized for Lucee calls, which makes it almost like a native call. I think dynamic invocation might be about 10 times slower than direct native Java call. And the way how we do it is about 1.5 times slower than direct native Java call. And also with Lucee 7, now we're using a new version of ASM, which is the thing that we use to write bytecode, and that makes smaller and faster bytecode and optimized for getters and setters, for example. Then we are using, we're introducing, of course, loads of new performance improvements, like the startup, like the file access that we have in Lucee 6.2. And now one thing that makes Lucee 7 a lot faster is the on-demand model for configuration. Now, what does that mean? It does mean that the Lucee configuration, which was always loaded at startup and at runtime, was completely loaded in the beginning and now is only loaded whenever you need it. So why should we load something that will never be used in your source code? So whenever it's used the first time, it will be loaded and then it's there. But if you don't need it, well, then you don't have to. And that's why this we were able to get the startup time cut in half. And also the memory footprint is a lot lower. Okay, and then Lucee 7 will only have a single administrator, so you don't have the multi-mode anymore. This is due to the fact that you can always spin up a new instance in Docker or a new instance in a JVM, in a VM, or whatever. So, you know, back in the old days, servers were as precious as unicorn blood, right? In the meantime, they're not, right? They're throw away things, you know, things that you can build, you can script them, you can build them, and then you can throw them away. So there is no need for multi host administrators anymore, which was the case 20 years ago, but it's not anymore. And then Lucee also has the full Maven integration, so that is now official. In 6.2, it's still experimental. And we have full Java native support, which allows you to just implement and call Java objects from Lucee source code. And the full AI integration, I will show a couple of examples in a bit. And obviously, we will close the gap to Adobe ColdFusion 2020X, which whatever syntax they introduced or whatever new functions they introduced, we will close that with Lucee 7 as well. Good. Now, so all the Lucee artifacts are really coming from Maven. So we're not having a server that provides the data anymore. They're all coming from Maven, all the extensions. We uploaded everything to Maven ourselves, and now everything comes from there. It's handled there. And the dependencies are also handled by Maven, which makes it a lot easier to maintain. And your code actually can also load a library, and just by defining where the endpoint in Maven is, all the dependent Java libraries will be all loaded as well. Okay, and where you can define that is in your CF config. The CF config, by the way, has been changed from Lucee 5 to 6, from XML to JSON, and it's supporting the CF config syntax. And you can define these Maven repository endpoints in the application CFC or in a component or in the CF config. So I'll give you an example. The example, for example, and then the example here looks like this, that you have the Java settings, and then you say, okay, what is the artifact ID, like commons, being utils, what is the version, and the group. These strings are defined at Maven, or whenever you search for a specific library that you want to use, usually they are defined there. Good. So here, regarding the native Java support.
One quick question about the Maven support. Is it possible to support private Maven components, so things that come from either a private repository or would be stored locally on the machine itself?
I have no idea. I think it's possible because I know there is a message coming. I couldn't find that Maven package locally and online. So if it's locally, I think you can define the source where Maven is looking it up, but I have to ask. So please shoot me an email and I'll follow up with that. I'm sorry, awesome. I just don't know.
Yeah, thanks. And in my particular case, I've got a vendor that provides me a bunch of Maven artifacts, but they give me the actual artifacts as a part of a paid subscription, so they don't publish them on Maven itself. So that's where that comes from.
Sure. I'll make sure that I'll find that information for me. But please shoot me an email because it's almost 2 o'clock at night and I might forget.
Yep, so. Absolutely. Thanks.
Okay, so regarding Java, native Java support. So here, for example, in the Lucee code, you can just write this, import Java IO, and then you can create a new file, which is a Java object, right? And then you can dump that. And to give you a Maven example, so let's say, for example, you want to really use how to create or how to access a YAML file and how to parse it, etc. And you'll just go to this URL. I'm just going to copy this URL out here. Hang on, where is it? Hang on, let me just copy this and I'll go to a new screen here. So how to process YAML with Jackson, right? And then you see these dependencies here. This is the dependency, and there is another dependency, etc., etc. So if we go back here, what you will do is you go to your application CFC, you add these dependencies, which are exactly the same thing, but here they are in XML and they're in JSON, right? You just define them as JSON, both of them. And then you just use these libraries as they are defined. It tells you in that example here as well what you need to do. Then you create a new object mapper, and that's it, right? This is all you have to do. You don't have to put any jar files anywhere. You don't have to find out what dependencies are regarding this. And now you can do everything that this YAML library is doing. You can use that in Lucee, which is really awesome. Makes a lot of things easier because CFML developers are usually limited within their own realm of CFML coding. But if you have so many millions of Java developers creating really cool libraries and making it so easy to just use them, that is really awesome. Anyway, okay, so let's have a look at AI integration. So the AI configuring your AI is really as easy as just defining a new data source. Let's just have a look at that. So if I go to AI experimental, I can just define a new name, and I'm just going to go to edit here. I'm just going to give it a name. I'll give it a name. Then I can say, okay, what is it? Is it ChatGPT or Llama? There are others possible. You just need to define them. I don't know exactly where, but it's possible. And you could have, for example, a local Ollama AI running, and then you can pass on the URL for that one. Then here I have my ChatGPT secret key for it. Then I'll say which model am I using, and I'll hit submit. Then I can just ping this one and just say, okay, what's going on? Ping pong, how can I assist you today? So AI is responding, right? And now whenever I have an error, it will try to give me, let's see, bad JSON feedback. I think this is, the reason why it takes so long is because it goes and asks ChatGPT for some issue. Okay, and now it tells me analysis of the exception. The exception occurs due to syntax error, blah, 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 blah. Right, so ChatGPT goes, looks at the error. Obviously, we are obfuscating everything all the strings and literals that you have before sending it over there. And don't forget, you can also ask a local running AI model for handling the error and sending the result there. And this is now here, that's the reason why it's in parens. This is now giving you the result and the reason why the error happened. But this is not all we're using it for. So for example, if we go here to documentation, and you can see that I think on one of the next pages, I'll show it to you in a second here. So these are all the things that we are supporting: ChatGPT, CodePilot, Claude, DeepSeek, et cetera, and more of them are obviously coming. And Ollama is a local AI, and they're all based on a specific open interface. And this you have seen just before. It explains to you why the error is happening and gives you maybe some examples. And another thing that it does, and this is really nice, it just tells you analysis of code execution bottlenecks. It tells you, okay, what did take so much time? And what is the reason why here line 854 arguments color blah, blah, blah takes a lot of time. Then generating HTML for structs take a lot of time. The following code sections are taking significant amount of time. Hang on here. And this is also possible by just sending all the debugging information that we have, including so-called page parts. Page parts are in Lucee, how long does each code block take to execute? And then the AI is analyzing why your code takes so much time and what you could do maybe about it. Or it just tells you what took so much time. The next thing that it can give you is you can just go into your documentation and write, give me an example to create an array in CF script, and then it gives you an example. Obviously, you can also do this within ChatGPT, but first of all, you would need ChatGPT only knows everything that it reads on the net. But we are thinking, or we are writing a Lucee.ai server implementation, which will know everything about Lucee, including the Lucee source code, including some projects that you can submit to it, and then it learns from that own source code, and it can give you much better examples. And there's more to come regarding this. So one other thing, for example, if you're doing something like, okay, Lucee create AI session, then you say, which one? Gemini. That is the name. That is this name. I just called this one local. That is this name. You are a Lucee expert. Keep your response short. And then you say, okay, answer equals Lucee inquire AI session. How can I create a loop over an array in Lucee? And then you just dump out the message. That is the response of whatever your AI responds to you. So let me just execute that code. Where is that here? Do I have, I guess, let's see. .cfm. Let's see, this of course, in Lucee you can create a loop over an array using the for loop. Here's an example, cfl set. Okay, so you see, I sent that to the local AI, which is my ChatGPT implementation. And I said, okay, how can I create a loop over an array in Lucee? And if you don't believe me, let me just change that and just say, how can I loop over a struct? Or hang on, wait, I got something else. Is Fusion Reactor working with Lucee, and is it easy to implement, to install? Sorry. Okay, let's see what it tells me. Refresh. Yes, Fusion Reactor works with, oh, wait. I'm a Lucee expert. Keep your expert, but I want a detailed answer. Okay, let's see. Maybe it does it a little bigger. Let's see. I've not tested it, so, oh, maybe it's loading a lot. Let's see what it does. I don't know. Thinking about it. Okay, well, here you go. So anyway, so it is possible, and it is compatible with Lucee and Fusion Reactor Powerful Application, blah, 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 blah. So I'm just outputting it in a very weird way here, but you see, you can use it very, very easily. And there are some very nice things that you can do with it. This is the thing that I love most about this. You can create a local retrieval argument generation, augmented generation. It's a so-called RAG. And you can index your complete application in real time. You can provide some context from your, let's say, Confluence pages, from your Jira tickets, from, I don't know, reducing hallucinations. This is not a code that I wrote. Maintaining data privacy while reducing hallucinations. Okay, well, I don't know, maybe AI wrote this, but I didn't. Anyway, might have been a slide that somebody else read. But the thing is this RAG runs locally in your environment. So nothing goes over the net. And just imagine that you can ask your local engine questions about your own code, where you can just say, okay, do we have so let me just do that here. Ask any Lucee related question. You can, for example, say, okay, do we have in our code a function that converts a string to, or converts a time to a string in seconds, or a number in seconds? And then that code will, that local RAG will be searched, and you might get a corresponding answer. Now, Lucee AI, for example, is something that allows you to communicate with it and ask it questions about deep related Lucee questions. It knows everything about the syntax, knows everything about all the code that we have written for Lucee, and about all the versions as well. And it, of course, can interact with your local environment because it might know what local environment you use. And it might even help you with issues that you have locally. Now, this was the thing that I was mentioning before. We're creating a language server for VS Code, which allows you to interact with, have VS Code interact with the Lucee version. The Lucee version is started up whenever the language server is implemented, or when you start VS Code. You can have it start up the Lucee server as well, which is started in a very short amount of time. And you can do things like component introspection, syntax highlighting, formatting, CF format. You can compile, for example, on save and then display there is a server, there is a compilation error, or you could even have CodePilot or AI interaction with your local version of it. And you can also maybe use the interaction input to just say, okay, please write a function that does that using functions from our own code. So convert something into something else. Yeah, so it's going to be pretty interesting what this language server will be doing. A very good addition to the Lucee debugger. Lucee 5.4 will be turned into a LTS version, long-term support. Currently, we're planning to support Lucee 5.4 until the end of 2026. And we will, of course, implement regression fixes. We haven't talked about Lucee 6 LTS just yet. That will be happening whenever we release Lucee 7. Currently, we're expecting to release it sometimes in summer this year, maybe to CFCamp, not sure. Maybe that will be the final release candidate, or the release candidate 1 or 2, which will be released for Lucee for CFCamp this year. Okay, this is what I had so far, and now I'm open for questions. Yeah, so
I have a few, but is anybody else that wants to start off?
You can open the mic maybe for everyone. I don't know
Yep.
whether that's possible.
I did. Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick. I've got a whole bunch of questions and comments, but I was going to maybe wait, let other people go forward.
Okay. So I guess you mentioned with Lucee 7 getting the ACF compatibility or closer to it.
Yeah.
I know some of the things that they've added in the last 2 releases include like the OAuth support and Microsoft Graph support. Is that something that you're planning on adding as well, or is that more going to be maybe
It
something that
depends
gets
on the demand, simply on the demand. If somebody asks for that, we will implement it because, you know, look, we don't have the full monetary support that Adobe has. We don't make, I don't know, they make about 30, 40 million a year with the ColdFusion sales. We don't, right? We live
Sure.
off of, I don't know, 100K or so a year, right? And mostly for a little more, 150 or whatever it is. And we only pay development of Lucee for that. Everyone else who's on the advisory board does this in their spare time, including me, right? So I'm not getting paid anything from Lucee. I'm just doing this because it's one of my babies, right? One of my kids as well. And obviously, we're always open for support, and or for monetary support. You can always go to Open Collective and just support our project, which we would appreciate a lot. And but yes, we will try to implement as many things as possible that which ColdFusion has introduced. But obviously, many of those things that ColdFusion introduced are, of course, requested by their clients, right? And every client has different requirements, and therefore, it may or may not make sense for us to implement them or not.
Sure. Okay. Another kind of a side thing too, I know with Lucee 6, they've implemented, like, all the configurations are stored in now the cfconfig.json format.
Mm-hmm.
is there any documentation of what that format is or all the different options are? I've kind of struggled with this myself, and the only documentation I found points to Ortis's site, because they, share some of the same configuration, but there's quite a few things in their configuration server or there's quite a few things in Lucee that aren't in their like CF config project.
Yes.
So I'm kind of at a loss on how to implement some of those, particularly when I'm deploying like Lucee Docker images.
Okay. Well, first of all, what you can always do is you can go to the administrator and export it from there. Like whatever you're configuring there, you can export it from there, and that generates a cfconfig.json for you with exactly what you need. Right? Everything is in there. And then obviously, Lucee implements the same syntax as cfconfig itself, but of course with loads of additional support of it. So what I would do, and I don't know exactly. So here is a place where you can help as well with the documentation. We could even use an AI version of that to just document that based on whatever Ortis has and what Lucee generates from the administrator. I don't know if you have ever seen that, but from the administrator, you can export the configuration as it is right now. So what I would do is I would actually just go and set everything in the admin how you want to have it, click export, and then you have the cfconfig as you want it. And obviously then you can change it with either variables that you generate, or you can use environment variables in the same way. And the admin should contain all of that information, how you configure something. I don't know whether this is sufficient, but if not, I'll just take a note and ask, or please add it to the email that you're sending me anyway.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Rick, you want to ask a few questions, or Randy, or anybody else?
I think I have one or a comment. I mean, I'm an ACF guy, but I did come to the conference, and Lucee is definitely attractive to me. I'm looking at 7. I'm like, it's some nice features that you shown, but I was kind of wondering about the compatibility. And I think we talked about this in Germany and how they were kind of, the gap between ACF and Lucee is getting wider, maybe. Just
it's especially, it gets wider in comparison to you can't go from Lucee to ACF. From ACF to Lucee should be a lot easier, because we have loads of things that we have introduced that Adobe just does not do. Like take, for example, return type in queries. If you, for example, if you have CF query return type equals struct, and then you have a key column, then it won't return a query, it will return a struct where you have the keys being that key column, like, for example, an ID. And the values would be a struct containing one record for that ID, right? So if you use that in your code, you can't go back to ColdFusion if you heavily use that. And we have many of those things that Adobe just didn't implement. So while we are looking to close the gap to them, they're not looking to close the gap to us. So while we might grow more apart, it is only growing more apart when you want to go from Lucee to ACF. But I hope not in the other direction. Okay?
Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, Rick, go ahead.
Okay, I've got a whole list of things, and I guess it's some of them are comments and some of them are questions. So I think the rework.
But maybe you can turn on your camera so that I'm at least talking to somebody.
There you go. There you go. I think the rework docs are great. The examples are fantastic to add. That really will help a lot of people. I know Adobe has and I'll go back and forth between the two. They have the line error in 2 or 3 things in the error message that it might be, and they have a high percentage. I don't know how they do it, but it makes debugging really fast. I never realized how nice that was until going to Lucee, because some of the error messages that I get to me anyway, as someone who's never programmed in Java, are cryptic. And to be able to have that so it's clearer, even if you only give one thing, it might be that most likely it makes it a lot clearer, a lot easier to debug in Lucee. So
maybe you can just follow up with an example like that, because I'm always happy if we can improve our documentation and our error messages and what have you. And if this AI implementation tells you what the error might be and where it might be, then that should be also already very helpful, right?
Absolutely. I have a question about Maven, and it's again my lack of understanding that Java world, but I've thought that for a long time that CF had the ability to tap into this Java world that would make it way more powerful as a language. And it doesn't seem to have ever, gotten super popular. And I think you're moving in that direction. I'd like a tutorial, and I apologize if it's there and I don't know about it, on finding a Java library in the wild and making it, not just getting it working. I've done some of that. And I have people I can ask questions to if I get stuck. But how to make it plug in so that it would be in the list in admin. And if you had just a page on a list of where people have worked it out, but having it so you could just automatically, hey, somebody got here before me, boom, I've installed it, it goes.
Right.
That would be,
I tried to show you that with the YAML support, in the presentation, where I just said, okay, listen, you just take the path to the Maven repo, right, which contains the library, so the endpoint, and then you just import that library and then create that object, and that should be it. But I'm not the Java expert, but I will use it more and more now because it now is so easy to do. Before, it was always really a pain in the ass because you always had to make sure that you have all the dependent libraries. Then you had to restart the server sometimes and make sure that you're casting properly and everything. And now everything should be very, very seamless and make it really, really very, very easy to do so. And if you actually, the good thing about the whole AI support is you could actually ask in your monitor, you could ask, can you give me an example on how to use this Java library on Maven within Lucee 7, right? And then it just gives you all the code that you need, right?
Okay.
So while I can give you that tutorial, or maybe one of our core guys, maybe Misha, I'm pretty sure ChatGPT might know it as well once Lucee 7 is out.
Okay. I just think it would help people. You could end up overloading the list. Right now, there's just a small list of, 10 or 15 of the most popular libraries people can use. But on the other hand, I think it would be very interesting if all of a sudden that list got populated with a whole bunch of stuff.
Right, right.
And I like the idea of query listeners. I think Lucee AI, and I've been doing a bunch of stuff with AI. I think Lucee AI is just an absolutely brilliant idea. I think you'll be copied by everybody else. I know with Claude,
I hope so.
You can create, and I forget what it's called, it's like a startup file. And you can tell it every time that I ask you a question, here, I'm developing in Lucee, and here's where their docs are. So it doesn't have to go find anything. And I think with Lucee AI, if it's got enough examples, there's not as much code written open source, so it has fewer things to look at, and it might pick up some bad examples. Whereas if it's just pointed at you, it's going to go to your code first, and it's going to be better examples, I guess.
Yeah, because the local RAG that you're building should be out of all of your code that you have, and maybe the public available code that is out there. And then it gives you please give you an example from our own code, how we have solved that in the past. Or you could say, what does the function so-and-so do, right? And then that local RAG tells you, okay, this is what it does, and it has been used in blah, blah, blah places, and this is the guy you need to talk to because he or she implemented it.
Okay.
Right?
We've talked before, we talked in Germany about my interest in serverless. So if I'm understanding right, 7 will be supporting serverless.
Well, it might maybe be 7.1, but that is where the direction goes, where we want to deploy headless, where you can just start up the jar without anything else. Maybe it will still load a very, very small servlet implementation, but I'm not sure because, Boxlang, for example, is born today where you don't have the requirements that we had 22 years ago anymore. So we had to evolve into that direction, and now we know that certain things are required. So what we'll do is we'll just do a spin-off of the Lucee jar, and maybe allow us to create a very simple Lucee jar startup. We already managed to do that, but it's not yet satisfying because we had to fake request and response and what have you. But I'll follow up with more as soon as I know more regarding this. But it will be 7 or 7.1 where headless deployment will be possible.
One last question, and that's about OAuth. OAuth has been a sore point for me for a long time. It's nice for logins, and that was most people know it for, but I'm interested in protecting APIs with it. If you got it, you can use it for both.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we use it.
Any idea when that's going to be available, or is it?
I think this is something that we're considering in 7.1 as well, because we are using OAuth with very many clients already as well. And ColdFusion has built it into 2023 as far as I know. A very simple way of doing that. And I know that many people are struggling with implementing OAuth as well, authorizing against your own servers. And so let me just follow up with that. I just don't know just yet from the top of my head.
Okay. Well, it's something I've been waiting for a long time.
I know.
Some people I know have done it. I think Nick has written some, but maybe I'm just not at that level where I have a hard time figuring that stuff out. So make it easier for us. That's why I went with CF 26 years ago, is because they allow you to do things easier. So agreed. Okay. John, have you got any questions?
So I have some more if John doesn't, or it looks like John had to drop.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Nick.
Yep. So I guess a little bit on the Docker side, since I deploy Lucee Docker images almost entirely. I know that Tomcat doesn't, or they've switched more to having Ubuntu as like their default image as opposed to Alpine, and that was a change that I think happened between might have been 5.2 and 5.3 or something like that. Is there any thoughts about moving or having an image based off of Alpine again, which is a ton smaller, has a lot less vulnerabilities?
I don't really know. I know that we are using the Ubuntu one, as far as I remember. Not sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't know.
Okay.
I'm sorry if I sometimes have to say I don't know, because the field is so big that I can't really give you an answer on everything. I would rather give you a qualified answer by getting back to you, right? And so, okay, go ahead.
So another one for Docker too is, for a while they were publishing like -0 packages or images. So you have like the Dash Lite, which excludes most of the default extensions and all that type of stuff. And then for a while they were doing -0 as well, which also did not automatically include the administrator or the docs or some of those other things. And the nice thing about that too is it also removed a lot of the CVEs that were just present like in the docs and that type of stuff. But those are not always published.
I think they're only published if we're building a complete build of the engine. So if it is a release candidate or whatever, I'm not sure. But again, I'll ask, because I know that we have all of them. So 0 and what was it? Which one is it? 0 and Lite, or which one is it?
Yeah. So Dash Lite is available for pretty much everything, and then -0 comes sometimes. Like, and it's not even, I wouldn't say it's even consistent across RCs. It's haphazard, it seems.
Okay, good. I'll ask for that as well. Please put it in the email and I'll make
Yep.
sure that I'll answer that. You can then post that in the comments in whenever you're posting this video.
Okay. And then the last one I had, again, about Docker. One of the things that between versions, it seems like the locations of the log files of the different, like application logs, exception logs, all those types of things keep on changing. And even sometimes, and I think it has to do with when they're updating some of the packages that Lucee's depending on and that type of stuff, like Tomcat and all that. But one thing that would be extremely useful for me is because really the only thing I'm doing in my Docker file is I'm piping those logs to like syslog and errorlog to be inconsistent with best practices of Docker. Is there any thought about making like an environment variable or something like that so those automatically get sent over to those like the syslog or the error log?
I think that is already possible because you can define everything in Lucee to over environment variables, so everything can be configured like that. So, and
I haven't seen that actually as a environment variable that I found. So. If it is something there, I haven't seen it exposed.
Okay, let me just make sure that that is the case because I know that we are using that in our deployments, that we're rerouting the logs to a different folder. Maybe it's not possible to use the default system out and system error. Sure. Again,
so,
add it to the list. And then I'll make sure that I'll.
And the other thing, like and kind of an enhancement of that would be because right now my Docker file essentially starts concatenating or essentially I have to create some of my custom log files, and then I have to go and send those to like syslog and that type of stuff. So it would be nice if that, like, again, an environment variable says any log or created with like CF log or whatever it might be automatically gets sent over there so that those logs can be captured by like AWS or whatever log engine that I'm using inside Docker.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be a great feature request because I think others might want that as well. I know that we're using it for some of our clients, but there we're always setting it specifically.
Yeah, so I can do that. Yeah, I can do it manually in my Docker file. It's just it's kind of cumbersome because if I start logging to a new file, I need to then make sure I create that and all that stuff. So
agreed. Okay,
cool. That's the last questions I had.
Okay, anyone else?
I asked some questions, but Nick kept asking so many. Jesus.
Okay, Randy, go ahead.
I did have a question though. Sure. Regarding the guy, and I don't know if he's still in the room, regarding they're leaving ACF and they're going to Lucee. I want to know the reason that they're leaving, and also from Gert, from your standpoint, is there some like I'm trying to think of like when I left Android and I went to iPhone. It wasn't really the iPhone that I liked. It was the experience and how things seamlessly went over. So is there any like widgets or things built into Lucee that also help things go over seamless? And I didn't see who asked that question about ACF.
So
go ahead.
So that was me. And I do appreciate that. I was just about to post selfishly that we're now in this transition period to go from ACF to 6.1 for Lucee, and then you said 7.0, and I got excited about AI, and I'm like, man, should we? But we can't wait because we got to do it by like the middle of February. So, and our reasoning is we've wanted to do Lucee for a while because of, like you said, everything that it entails, even with the new AI in 7.0. Just the fact that you guys are more progressive in that, in my mind.
6.2 already contains all of this experimentally, so 7 is just kind of finalizing it. So once you go from 6.1 to 6.2, you can already use it.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's part of my selfish question. But thank you, Randy, I believe, for asking that, for that kind of transition material or a widget, if you will.
No problem. Just trying to help.
Did you have another question, Randy?
Wanted to answer, Randy. What you can do is you can take go to mappings, for example, and create a mapping which points to slash, and then click the button compile. And then that compiles your complete code that you have in your environment and tells you if there are any issues with the code that you're experiencing, that you're using before from ColdFusion. Because there might be something like CF client or some other things, some syntax errors, because Lucee is not as forgiving as ColdFusion is. So for example, if you have something called CF set a.b that works in ColdFusion, but it doesn't in Lucee. So you can just go and compile everything through, and then it will tell you all the errors that it has found in that code. And then you can go and fix those errors. And usually it should be relatively straightforward to install. Usually how I did it in the past is I took the code, compiled it through. Once I got rid of all the compilation errors, I just called the main file, and then there were runtime errors that I had to deal with. And those runtime errors, if you don't have a test suite, usually when you have a test suite, you run that test suite, and when that test suite is not running into any errors anymore, well, there you go, then your code is converted. But if you don't have a test suite, then you have to go through the application. First of all, what I would do before I would start writing scripts to deploy it, I would set up a local machine on Lucee, use the administrator, and go set up the data sources, go set up everything that's necessary. Maybe create a local Docker environment where you have all the setups there, like a database and I don't know, another database, and then a caching server or whatever. And then once you have those set up, then you can just test your application and go through it one by one. That is more or less the way how I would do it, and I was quite successful in the past, right? So, Gilmore, there you go. I mean, the compilation, that is an idea that usually doesn't come to mind, first of all. And also, we have a compatibility document which you can check. I guess it's somewhere on the docs pages. Just go either ask ChatGPT or somebody, but there is a document. If not, I have it on my computer, which says, okay, what happens when you go from ACF to Lucee? What do you lose? What do you gain? Right? What are the issues that you might run into? Hope that answers your question, Randy.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe
Yep.
you can.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, maybe you can get to the point, Gert, where the AI converts it over for you.
There you go. I mean, that can totally happen. And
just document what the differences are, and maybe not get rid of all of them, but I know people have converted some pretty big code bases in a relatively short period of time. So.
Yeah. So usually I'm not expecting any pitfalls or anything. And the thing is this: while I embrace AI a lot, I also don't trust it that much, because very often when I ask it for an example, it gives me bullshit. And then when I tell it, hey, but I'm sorry, this is not working, it, oh yes, an oversight on my end, and then it gives me another bullshit, right? And so that's why AI is good, but it makes us lazy. It's just like when you, for example, see somebody in a movie, that face, and you take out your computer or your phone and look up who that was, instead of using your own brain and kind of going through the process of remembering, okay, who was that? Where have I seen that? It is usually better to understand what you're asking ChatGPT, so that when it gives you a response, that you can understand what it tells you and that you can trust that answer.
We've had a local AI user group in the Lansing area for about 1.5 years. And what I observed, a very interested in AI and playing around with it a lot, the younger people in the group totally tested it and believed it, and never thought that it ever hallucinated. And yet I found case after case after case where it was wrong. I just recently said on Twitter that I thought will really have AGI when the AI is smart enough to say, I don't know the answer to that question. It always has an answer to the question, whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah, it
But
always says, I'm sorry, oversight on my end. No, it's
Yeah.
not. You actually just don't understand what you're saying. You know, the big thing about AI is trained on things that are on the internet, and those things are written by average people. And you know, under those people that are writing the content for that AI to be fed is not only great code, it's also stupid code, right? Might be stupid code that I have written, right? And it might give me some examples which just plain don't work, right? And you know, if you just ask the average person about an opinion, you might be lucky and get a great one, and you might be absolutely unlucky and get a stupid answer, right?
Well, what I've noticed though is that it's advancing at a much rapid rate. Things that it
That's true.
did wrong 6 months or a year ago, it's like people I know have like written it off from looking at the early AI, and they
Yeah.
have no idea because they walked away. I have one last sort of future request for you, or something for you to think about. I've been playing around with WASM, and I there's like 3 different plugins for Java. WASM is, unfortunately, it's a heartbreaker because it's not quite there. There's several startups that have got millions of dollars and they've been cranking away for the last 2 years, and it's gotten better. I think for a couple reasons, it'd be kind of cool to have a CF plugin so you could compile the code and just start playing around. Highly experimental is what I'd say at this point. But for serverless, where you've got a small function, you try to load 100,000 lines of code, it's going to break. It just doesn't anticipate. It's like self-driving. It doesn't
Right.
anticipate every possible thing that can happen. But when you've got something small, it works and it's cool. With like JavaScript, it'll like shrink it down. It's like faster, not always noticeably faster, sometimes very noticeably faster. And some of the Java guys I know that have played around with it like it, but it's not ready for production. But that doesn't mean we still shouldn't be looking at it.
Right. Well, the thing is this: if it's available in Java, it will be available in Lucee. And what we could do is we could actually wrap it with some very easy tagging or, I don't know, construct to allow you to compile your code in WASM or for WASM. But currently, I don't know. We haven't looked at it just yet. Right? I had to look it up what it is.
Just
I
putting
actually
it
had to
on your
look.
radar because it's
Yeah,
one
yeah,
of those
sure,
things
totally.
that's kind of cool. And I just read the other day they've got a competitor that uses some mathematical formulation, and I can't find much on it other than it's been announced they've got it.
Okay.
I can't
Well,
remember
as soon
the
as we
name.
have, as soon as we have some more info on it, I'll let you know. Shane, you have a question.
Yes. So it was just 2 small things, but one, I'm pretty excited about the AI stuff, but because I've been kind of in charge of our like transformation from CF to Lucee, so I've been using ChatGPT a lot, and like the things that I've seen the most are like it reading ColdFusion documentation and thinking it's Lucee or the other way around. So I'm very
Yeah.
excited about like the custom models that you were mentioning and like actually having something that's trained on the actual Lucee documentation that's vetted. I think that would go a long way rather than trying something and then it
Yes.
doesn't work. So that's pretty
Agreed.
cool. And I just wanted to make a comment about, since I've been going through this transformation, like it's been working pretty well. And the things that I have seen have been very small. And usually there's some of those like developer practices that you mentioned at the beginning of like stuff that we shouldn't be doing anyway.
Right.
That's like,
Right.
this code probably shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So
Understood.
like for the most part, I just wanted to make that comment for Randy that it's been pretty easy. I guess the biggest problem has been like library support for, we had an issue with like CF forms that was kind of
Right.
annoying to try and get working. And we just got a spreadsheet library working today. Fun stuff.
Have you already used some of the new Lucee stuff that is not available in ColdFusion?
Yeah, a bit.
Yeah, because
you
you know
mentioned the
that's when
return
the fun
types today.
starts. Yeah, but that's when the fun starts,
Yeah.
right? When you start using these features where you think, oh, where have you been all my life? You know, and this should be the reason why I was saying at the beginning, we wrote this from a developer perspective, right? We're not writing this from a client perspective where the client defines what they need, but we see what annoys developers. Like, for example, if you're hovering over a dump, this is something that is there since Rilo 1.0. If you take your mouse, hover over a dump, it tells you where that dump comes from, right? It gives you the line of code, right? And so many of those things are in there since early days, and we try to implement them and make them better and faster. And we all need the feedback from the community so that we can improve the language and make it better and faster and still alive. And we're still here. So thank you, everyone. And I think there are no more questions so far, and I need to get to bed, right? So thank you very much. It was a pleasure. And Rick, we'll see you hopefully soon in Munich again. And Nick, you're welcome as well. Everyone's welcome, because that is really a great conference, a lot of fun, and we will be definitely there. And let me know if you need any other info. Send me an email, and see you soon.
Right. Thanks again. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks very
Thank
much. And
Take care.
will see you in Germany sometime. I can't say which year. But,
okay. Thank you very much, and have a great day. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.